Okay. So last week we started reading Mind Region. So let's do a deep dive into this mind region. Some of the aspects which we are going to read today, we sort of discussed the trap of egoism. We'll go through it from here. So after the five chakras of the heart, the next seven chakras are all the realm of ego. Having now transcended our earthly opposites, the five C's and the five D's, and liberated ourselves from samskaras, we are ready to confront just one pair of opposite, soul versus source. So this is the now key. I mean, this is like almost stepping into the real. We passed out of now elementary school. Now we are getting into the middle school, right? So now in the things we are going to talk, learn is totally different, devoid of all the human external elements. Now this is the real inner journey begins. We did talk about all the emotions, right? Anger versus calmness, disturbance versus confusion versus clarity. We did discuss all of these things. Now we're kind of going all these above the opposites. So once we go into the above the opposites, the real the dvandva, as they say in Sanskrit, the real opposites begin. The soul, meaning the Atman, versus the source. So the source is the ultimate essence. Now so there are two schools, two ways of looking at it is. The two, I mean, when all my identities, we did talk about identities, all my identities drop, what remains is the source. And the other way of saying it, for me to identify with the source. So some might question, how can I identify with the source that which I cannot cognize, perceive? Even if I perceive, with what faculty am I perceiving? Right? So that is why, the Daji gives a very good analogy for meditation. Meditation, the word for meditation is dhyana, the. So you're using that vehicle of consciousness, the inner essence, as your journey. That's why it is meditation. So even in meditation, we are transcending the mind. So that's why we have to meditate. Why? Because so that you can transcend your mind, so that you can use that as the vehicle. Right? So let's read into the text. So this is a vast area of consciousness and is called the mind region. As you move in the mind region, I-ness or I amness begins to recede, and we anchor ourselves in the center. Up to this point, our life was centered around I and the thou. The higher self was in periphery. It was in periphery because it's just an idea, right? So I recently started giving this example. How do you explain a 5-year old about the marital life? In whatever words you can explain, the child cannot comprehend or understand what does it take for that marital life. But slowly, eventually, when the child gets married, child will understand, and it is a completely different from what the child understood. As a 5-year old, as a 10-year old, as a 15-year old, as a 20-year old. But eventually, when the child gets married, it's completely different than what the child heard or understood. And the child will say, no one explained this to me, right? But you have to understand it on yourself or by yourself. So, same thing here. All these texts are giving you some idea. But as we grow into it, as we become into it, it's completely a different aspect. So that's why the understanding is very essential in the beginning. Through understanding, through listening, by reading, listening also includes reading, we get some direction, we get some idea, and we also get some idea about why it is important in our life. Why should I give good amount of time for it in my life? And then slowly as we grow into it, this understanding changes. Our efforts also refine. As the efforts are refining, we will find it easy and natural. Okay. So it's a very natural journey where there is no effort required. But initially, the effort is required because our attention is somewhere else. We have to divert our attention to this side, this aspect of life, because here there is nothing enticing, nothing stimulating. We try to use the same enticement stimulation by talking few great things about it. It's only to console ourselves and say, hey, oh, this is something extraordinary, great I am practicing than other what the other people are doing. It is only just our presumption that we are doing something great. But slowly, as it gets refined, it becomes a very natural process. So there is nothing to boast about, right? So now we are re entering around thou, and the I dissolving away even from the periphery means now the my life is seen through that higher lens. What is that lens we are using? Always we are using that lens as the consciousness, but it is colored in the beginning. Now the clarity is developing. All the colors in front of that consciousness are getting removed so that we can see the things as is. But what we are seeing is only the reflection of it. Here again, seeing means what is the instrument to see that? The consciousness itself. So, how the eye can see the eye itself? It requires a mirror, right? So, that mirror we are holding is meditation, right? So, what is the higher self or thou? It is the possibility of all that you could be, the highest potential that your soul can ascend to. Remember that merger between the two like entities, infinity merging into infinity. Your higher self represents the highest possibility that you embody, and your yatra means journey. Yatra is the journey to actualize that possibility. So, here, now again, this higher is so misunderstood. So, today, let's try to understand what this higher potential really means. Higher potential does not mean you wave the hand, the rains will come, you wave the hand, the fire will come. It's not like that. So, higher should not be equated to some kind of extra powers. There is no power in higher. So, just because I am a higher doesn't mean I can heal anybody. or I can heal myself. You see, we always somehow got into this idea that the higher knows everything. What if the higher does not know anything? What if this higher doesn't have any powers, which we assume? Like we make this higher as a Superman. So, those of you who have seen the Superman movie, the recent one, you see the Superman is beaten black and blue. Means whenever we talk about something powerful, there is another power which can beat it. But here, something from which even the power comes, what can beat it? So there is no opposite for it, or there is no bigger than it, there is no smaller than it. That's why the Veda says, Anor Anyan Mahito Mahyan means it is bigger than the biggest, it is smaller than the smallest. So, can you imagine such a state which there is nothing bigger than that and there is nothing smaller than that? You see, what it means is really it is something which comprises everything, which combines into everything. Summum bonum means the summation of all is that ultimate. So that means it is not devoid of anything. You're getting it? So that's why we should not think of higher as a capability rather than the higher is a state. So here the potential is of the state, not of any powers. So the potential word should not be misunderstood. So we should not attribute this potential as all knowing. It is all knowing because it is in everything, but it doesn't have a consciousness to comprehend that knowing. It is beyond consciousness. So just because it is, that's it, it is. So there is no up and down. If for me to comprehend something, I have to be devoid of it. You understand? If I'm cognizing something, if I'm looking at reading what I'm seeing on my computer, I'm separate from what I'm reading. How can I be part of it and still comprehend it? It is not possible, right? So that's why, I mean, people always question me if the guru is at a higher consciousness, why doesn't he know what happens in the future? If the God is higher, why God doesn't know what happens in the future and correct it? If God could have corrected it, the humanity is not in the state what it is in today. Why do I have to be a devout individual to that God and correct myself instead of God correcting me? Why God cannot correct is because He is also in you. It's all pervading. It's in everything. It's not devoid of anything. It's in my good character. It is also in my bad character. That's why the Bible says the God has to come in a human form to fulfill the covenant, right? So fulfill that treaty, whatever that agreement. That's why it requires a mind which is at our state to help us. And that mind is Guru. But again, we kind of attribute the Guru to be all knowing and all powerful. No. That Guru has this highest connection, potential, understanding, clarity, where he can bring the same clarity into us. That is the role of the Guru. Anything else are all our presumptions. Okay. So that's why the journey through the mind region asks us to sublimate the ego to its purest form. In this context, sublimate means to make nobler and purer. We are not pushing down or dominating our ego, but rather refining them to into a higher status. So this refinement is nothing but slowly developing that identity which is our true identity. That's why if you go to Vedantic schools of thought, they say, oh, everything else is unreal and only that is real. Everything else is an appearance, they say. So, but then, the process which is emerged out of it is okay, if everything is an appearance, if I let go all the appearance, what remains is the purest form. So, how long can you filter what is unreal? And as you are filtering where your focus is on what is unreal and you don't want it, no, it creates an enormous pressure on the mind. That kind of an approach creates an enormous pressure on the mind. Rather, in what we are doing through meditation is we are meditating on that which we want to become. Here, there is no negation, nor we are saying this is bad or good. So, we are going above all the opposites. That is the approach, a very unique approach the heartfulness has taught us. That's why the science which heartfulness has produced is not there available in any of the texts in this world which is produced so far. It's a very unique approach in that sense. And in this unique approach, there is no negation. The negation, state of negation happens very naturally. State of negation is nothing but where our soul has identified itself with the source. So when the soul and source become one, where is the separation? And we are calling it as merger, but the merger is not as we understand something coming together. All that it is, that I-ness, the ego has refined. The more it is refined, the more it becomes identical to the source. So it's a refinement rather than something coming together or something separating. Something is getting separated from us. Because that which is all inclusive cannot be separated. So that which is all inclusive is already there. Okay. So if that is very essential for us to understand, to approach into this mind region, but as we practice, it becomes a very natural state. And this practice, we initially need some direction, understanding, but it grows into something much bigger than the what we have read or understood. Okay. So let's just read this paragraph and then we can get into meditation. So the journey through the mind region asks us to sublimate the ego to the purest form. In this context, sublimate means to make nobler and purer. We are not pushing down or dominating our egos, but rather refining them to a higher status. All of our efforts are directed at changing the form, not the essence. So when we work on ourselves to sublimate the ego, we preserve its essence of humility and allow it to manifest in our lives. So the ego creates I-ness, which is our sense of self. Without the sense of self, could you imagine I, me, and mine. So these I, me, and mine tendencies add up in subtle way, where we start identifying ourselves with all that is mine. These identities include my body, my intellect, my evolved consciousness, my family, my wealth, my house, my way of spirituality, my name, my position, my community, my country, my language, and finally you and yours, all that is mine. These identities help us live, conduct our day to day lives. So, nothing wrong with that. What we do in spiritual anatomy project is to identify with the highest that lead life from that vantage point. So it is only a shift in the perspective, but not negating anything, not discarding anything in our lives. We are not discarding our families, our jobs, our positions, our wealth. Everything stays as is. Nothing has to be changed. All that we are doing is now that which is real, we are bringing that into our life. So there is no negation of anything here. It's an inclusion, just like the real essence, what we call the God, is inclusive of everything. It is not divide. It cannot judge. There's no judgment because there is no separateness for it to judge. Okay. So that's the understanding for today. So, any comments, any observations you want to share? All right.